I was really starting to enjoy flying. It was very liberating, not only avoiding traffic of cars and pedestrians, but the views of the city were the best from the sky, and the 6 degrees of freedom allowed me to go absolutely any way I felt. I also felt completely invulnerable, out of range of tanks and police helicopters. This feeling would quickly disappear, however, when a fighter jet appeared. He paused for a moment, which eliminated the value of my knowledge of jet propulsion and gravity, and then he tried to fly directly underneath me. I could see the several missiles attached to his aircraft, and the risk of being blown up through non-compliance, decided to take on the unspoken challenge of landing on the plane. It took several tries and the sun began to set, but eventually I landed successfully and got out of the cockpit. It was strange to stand on top of a plane this way, yet an accomplishment through which no in-game points were awarded. The moment only lasted a few seconds before the Maverick helicopter fell off, and I chased it, accidentally deploying the parachute immediately, as my helicopter plummeted to the ground. I looked up its location on the map and realized a little too late that parachutes do not stay attached if/when they collide with overpasses. After returning to life, I found it again, completely intact and upright, which eliminated the value of my knowledge about helicopters falling out of the sky, and it was holding up traffic. I was kind of amazed at how quickly the commuters were to accelerate following a helicopter that was recklessly flying backwards under an overpass, but I guess their destination was more important than surviving long enough to get there. Either that or they had complete faith in me as a pilot, the pressure of which actually forced my focus, and when I finally escaped I felt relatively accomplished, twice in a day. The city was actually really expansive and beautiful at night. I took in the sights flying between the buildings, which didn't seem to bother anyone. The fighter jet and its pilot were still around, and as he nimbly collided with the helicopter blades, I asked him how he had procured his aircraft. He said he purchased it, and when I couldn't find it in the military surplus store, he explained that he had completed a hijack mission for access. I'm sure there would be some level requirement as well as the level 70 for the tank, but I have to admit the appeal was there for a vehicle as amazing and maneuverable as that VTOL. I landed at the casino, which unfortunately was closed for the night, and the Vinewood sign, which was fortunately lit up for the evening. This had become my kind of go-to activity. As long as I avoided military bases, I would find an interesting place I could see from the sky, find a healthy landing spot, explore the surroundings, and then get back up in the air. I was increasing Francisco's flight stat 1% every 10 minutes, with the intent to return to flight school and complete the challenges when his skills had been improved. And to be completely honest, this flight simulation was very stimulating, as was the opportunity to explore the city in a very non-traditional way. One such place was this cul-de-sac. I hadn't seen any houses like this on the real estate website, and the number would go unanswered. I can't say I wasn't interested in purchasing a private property, so I would have to try again later. Having a house like this would definitely fall under some people's descriptor of the game as an opportunity to do anything you'd want to do. I found a pool on top of a building that seemed otherwise inaccessible, once again engaging in my exploration game. I didn't know whether to blame my pseudo-illegal behavior or my over-eagerness to go swimming fully clothed, but I forgot about the tail propeller, and unfortunately poor Francisco did not. Back alive on the ground with my helicopter once again intact, I'm unable to get back to it with no proper way to scale the building, and the Pegasus delivery agent claimed I already had access. Before I could get my car, the pilot from before had driven over to me and engaged in the tradition of horn honking and then realizing the car was locked and unlocking it. He had been amiable before, so I overlooked the loose tire he had parked on top of and got in. I was curious as to how an individual with such extensive experience conducted himself, what someone who had unlocked and purchased a $3 million plane would do when he was on the ground. He would drive his modest vehicle at such a quick speed that I believe our individual experiences were desynchronized. He would drive through cars and hit cars I couldn't see. Early on, he would arm himself with a brick of explosives, and it was at this moment I had to decide what Francisco was going to do. I was told as soon as I entered the car I would adopt the same wanted level as anyone in the vehicle, and although I couldn't tell exactly what that rating was, I knew it must have been relevant. Police helicopters and cars chasing, and now the brick of explosives. I could bail out of the vehicle, potentially killing Francisco and ending communication with one of the few sentient people connected to this server, or learn about this person. As far as I could tell, the police were after both of us now, and I could potentially be hunted down simply for association. I also knew at this point law enforcement wouldn't send appropriate countermeasures to stop the explosion-wielding millionaire, only the easily dispatched cars and helicopters virtually delivering point crops for him to systematically harvest at a very manageable rate. I watched in a quiet solace as the driver blew up car after car, driving to the top of a hill, at which point he somehow cancelled the pursuit, the police simply losing interest altogether. I inquired if they had just given up, but my question lost relevance as he collided with another police car. We took 2 turns into the helicopter port near my apartment because we had apparently been waiting for the Pegasus delivery of his solid gold Swift helicopter. The squad cars were coming, and not knowing my wanted status, I decided to continue on this path, seeing as I had already committed to this exploration and if only to protect Francisco's life. I had pressed the button to get into the helicopter, and Francisco decided to get into the back seat. I knew the military had helicopters and planes, and I had seen enough endless carnage sprees to know none of them would be dispatched to defeat this individual or the helicopter. It wasn't a fair fight. He could endlessly obliterate any law enforcement agents that came his way, and although it had been nice to ride in his luxury helicopter, the fact that the police had simply stopped chase mid-flight gave implications that maybe this individual was above their law. I was beginning to understand that money provided insulation from the law, the ability to purchase explosives and vehicles that could outmaneuver the under-equipped police, as well as potentially pay off their pursuits, and afford gold-plated helicopters that could shrug off weapon fire. It was luxurious as well, this helicopter, and not knowing our destination, I decided to engage, Francisco pouring and drinking an entire glass of champagne, an act he does so fluidly I'm not convinced it was the first time. The pilot landed the helicopter in a street and we got out. I found him near the pilot's entrance, of course, adhering explosives to the fuselage. After he detonated the beautiful aircraft in the middle of the street, he returned in his now pristine car and honked. I had simply seen enough. I couldn't appreciate this as anything but his way of showing off. Knowing the universe would continue to offer me opportunity to grow in this way, should I so choose, I decided to make a clean departure and watched as the police, which had been absent, all rushed to attack him. I was no longer sharing a wanted level, and I hadn't done anything wrong save potentially enable his relatively reckless decision-making. He had shown me his luxuries and had clearly done well for himself. But our journey could not continue together. There was nowhere for this to go. I understood his violent tendencies, and from this perspective it felt more as a passenger seat camera than anything to do with Francisco. I regret not asking him why he behaved this way. The reasoning I'm assuming was the standard "because I can," which made it slightly worse when the game reported he had taken the easy way out. I didn't know how to feel, and the worst part was that I didn't feel bad. I knew the world was filled with conflict, and it was not surprising that its denizens were indulging in the violent means so readily available. There were hierarchies in place, and as long as such behaviors were neatly tabulated into points and dollars with golden rewards at the top, I'm sure they would continue to embrace them. We were different, this pilot and I. He had used non-discriminatory and gratuitous violence against NPCs while I was actively trying to avoid such things. He was doing it before I got into his car, and after we parted ways. It was his world, to rain destruction endlessly, and as different as we were, I must note his clothing resembled the suit Francisco had once worn. We both were in the sky in the same time in the same place. We both knew we existed, and we both flew to the same coastal areas as we fled from the police. He was different than me, yes, diametrically opposed in principle, but we were still here, imprisoned in the world together, dealing with it in our own ways. To completely separate myself from someone else because of their different principles would limit Francisco's experiences. For example, I would have never seen this luxury to know it was not something I had a particular need for, and to disregard the value of another person in a world where death would not separate them from you seemed worse of a crime than hurting them.